Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. And once again, I've beaten a dead horse, Jim. We had another nice pregame, and kind of, we're thinking about some of the same things, and we weaved it all together. But today we're going to talk about the as that the foundation is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and for anybody that doesn't isn't familiar, it's a fairly traditional outlook on what we need as humans in a hierarchical order of I guess over time. I've got a diagram here, and I should probably just suggest that it starts off at physiological needs like air and water and food, and then it moves into safety and then love and belonging, and then things like esteem, and tops out at self-actualization. Although Jim found out today that towards the end of Maslow's life, he actually added another layer to that on top of self-actualization, which is he refers to as self-transcendence. So that's the nature of what we're going to talk about. And I think, Jim, unless you want to jump in first, I'm going to read the definition that you found for self-actualization and self-transcendence. Do you want to add something before I do that?
Yeah, I do, Mark. This goes back to, again, our pregame and the importance of frameworks. Of course, the Imperfect Men's Club, for those that don't remember or don't know, is based on a framework that we created of 5 areas of our life. It's called, in the center of that framework is our self. So self-actualization fits right into what we really talk about every week. But back to the framework, it's the Imperfect Men's Club. The imperfection is the perfection, meaning that at this stage in our life, we learn to be very self-aware, and we realize that as a man, particularly later on in life, mid 30s, mid 40s, mid 50s, and beyond, um, our profession, our life's work, has a lot to do with our identity. So we've even changed that, right, Mark? To used to be focused just on profession. Now we've updated that to our life's work, which is
Hmm.
part of now the podcast that we do weekly. The other area is in no particular order our relationship with others, our mothers, our daughters, our wives, girlfriends, our relationship with our fathers, difference between men and women, our relationship with ourselves, our uh, mental health or physical health, our relationships with money, which is a relationship, and our relationship with the world. And that could be your politics, your worldview, and obviously a lot of that comes from your heritage, your um, childhood, and even your spirituality. So, yeah, today I think reminds something of we've all learned this probably at one stage of our life and either forget about it or refer to it, but unknowingly. I thought it was interesting. This particular podcast was talking about Maslow's work right before he died. He added this another layer to it that not everybody knows about, and so um, I think it speaks to what we're doing every week at the in the Imperfect Mids Club podcast, as far as maybe less focused on the ego and more mission driven about how the impact that we can have on the world before we're gone here. And I think it fits right in
Yeah.
with what we
L-
talk
l-
about. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I don't think
Yeah.
I've seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs since maybe high school, maybe college. I
Yeah.
think it seems to me to be something that almost everybody knows something about, but
Hmm.
maybe not. And I
Yeah.
think the other thing that strikes me, couple things, Jim, that one we talked about and one we didn't. These levels of need, physiological, safety, love, esteem, self-actualization, self-transcendence,
Hmm.
they seem to kind of align with stages of our lives. Like when
Hmm.
we're born, everything in that category of physiological needs is what we get from our parents: air,
Hmm.
water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing. And
Hmm.
and 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 then as we get a little older and we start to become fearful of things that we were ignorant of when we were kids, safety becomes an issue. And then love and belonging is more of a maybe teenagers, 20 somethings, and then things become, as we become adults, esteem becomes something that's more something more interested, recognition, status, that kind of thing. And then self-actualization is the process that I think we begin later on in life when we start to think about our legacy and what we're going to leave behind and what we've accomplished and what our purpose is and all those kinds of things. So
Mhm.
I think it logically follows. And the other thing that can't escape me is that this is human nature.
Yes.
We are
Mhm.
all embedded with these needs.
Mhm.
And I think there's also room for this discussion about maybe not now, but the difference between men and women. Men and women have different needs. They have different human needs. And I think that one of the problems we have in the world today is we're trying to deny our differences and we're trying to suggest that we can actually go against human nature. So
Mhm.
let's get into this a little bit. I'll read the
Yeah.
definitions of self-actualization and self-transcendence. And again, self-actualization was at the top of Maslow's hierarchy until later on in his life when he added self-transcendence.
Mhm.
So, self actualization is the realization of one's full potential, creativity, and authentic self, representing the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It involves becoming the best version of oneself through continuous personal growth, purpose driven living, and self acceptance. Key traits include deep creativity, autonomy, gratitude, and genuine relationships. And self
Yeah. Hey, hey,
transcendence.
Mark, I'm going to inject something
Yeah,
right
yeah.
there. Yeah, this is something, again, just life lived experiences and experiences about, and empathy is another one that I think as time goes on, you find that quality people have empathy for others.
Hmm.
And then a lot of the work that I've done through my nonprofit and my I don't know how you want to describe it. I'll let you find a better way to describe what I do with the community I grew up in that I don't live in, and that is you start to have more of an appreciation for people that what I would call them is first world problems versus everyday problems. And
Hmm.
often, we don't realize not everybody has these things. They don't have the simple things like food and water. We just take it for granted that everybody has that. But
Hmm.
if you're let's just say I don't know, 15-year-old kid, and you're going home every day and there's no food in the refrigerator, and
Hmm.
you're going to function differently, right? Or you didn't sleep very well because you didn't have a bed to sleep in. These things are still going on today, and I've learned to accept people where they are than to maybe project my opinions on them unfairly. That's just
Well,
been
you
my
know,
life lived experiences. Yeah.
yeah, it's a great point. I mean, it's biblical, put yourself in the shoes of the other.
Yep.
And it's always something that I strive to do. It's a very easy thing to lose sight of. Taking things for granted is a real easy trap to fall into. It's one of
Yeah.
the reasons that for years now, I've started my journal every morning
Hmm.
with gratitude as I write it down. What are you grateful for?
Hmm.
Gratitude. I'm grateful for a lot of things. And I actually tell people, some of the people I coach, if you're struggling with self-worth or fairness or justice or what you might or might not be deserving of, just make a list of the things that you're grateful for and you'll shut yourself up real quick.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
but even just reflecting on this again, it's been a few years since I've seen this on the needs. Water, food, clothing. I'm just using an example of a 15-year-old young man, and he doesn't feel like his clothing is he's embarrassed of his clothing, or he didn't eat very well, or he didn't sleep very well. It affects everything else in their life. And
mhm,
then the next one is this safety. It's another, we take it for granted. The world is not a safe place.
right.
As Americans, we really don't value how safe it is in general. But if you grow up in certain environments, it's not safe. So that's again something that we just expect it to be that way all the time. And then even safety needs your health. That's one of my. I just came off a, a, a illness for the last week. Nothing real serious, but it's one of my new favorite quotes. When you have when you're healthy, you have hundreds of ideas and thoughts and dreams. When you're sick, you have one,
Hmm.
and that's just to get not
Get,
sick.
get
So
better. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the safety needs. It falls underneath, right? Your health,
Yeah. Well, I
and
also
then
think that human nature of this hierarchy, this
yeah.
triangle, this pyramid, if you will,
Hmm.
if you're not, if your physiological needs are not being met,
Yep.
which also probably means that your safety needs aren't being met because it's unsafe not to have all your physiological needs met,
Mhm.
then that's when people tend to do things outside of what we would consider to be good behavior because it's such a driving force. Without that, you could even have love, but
Mhm.
not have food, and you're going to do whatever you can to get food, right?
Yeah.
So these needs drive people's behavior, and I think
Right.
examining them and looking at them and talking about them is valuable because I think, like I said earlier, I think we're in denial of human nature now in our culture, and it's really weird, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, back to the hierarchy before we move on, and that's love and belonging. We all want the same thing, and
Hmm.
that's to belong, to be wanted, to be valued. That is a super important part of what everyone seeks, whether they're aware of it or not. Back to our self-awareness. Uh, Love and belonging is important. That's friendships, intimacy, a family, a sense of
Okay, connection.
connection.
Yeah.
Um, and not everybody has that. You may have, like you said, you may have food, you may have a wonderful home, but if you're alone and you don't have somebody that cares about you, and you don't feel like you're loved, you're not right. Or you're in a lot
Well,
of pain.
yeah,
And I think that this is probably one of the greatest challenges of our time is loneliness and isolation. So
yeah, yeah. No, it's really. I think it's one of the reasons that this hierarchy of needs has stood the test of time and been. We studied this in school, and it's still in all the books, and
yeah,
it's in history books, it's in psychology manuals, and it's true. It's
mhm.
and recognizing these needs and how they stack on top of one another. I think it's healthy to revisit every once in a while. It has been for
Yeah.
me already today, you
It
know?
it has, yeah. And then
Yeah.
the esteem. So it's respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom. Yeah, this uh, goes back to the different stages we're at in life, right? 5 years old, 10, 15, 20. I do think that that's the ego. When you're younger, I think by nature you have to be ego driven. And so you're feeding your self-esteem, your self-worth. A big part of that comes from uh, your self-esteem. Um, and then this is where self-actualization is desire to become the most that one can be. Yeah. So that's a, a desire I think we all have, but what we're going to talk about today takes it to one next level. So
Yeah, and I think that it's a rare human in my experience that participates in this self-actualization space at a young age.
mhm.
It usually requires a life lived in my experience to get there.
Yeah,
And many of us never get there.
yeah,
I think, one of the things my dad likes to say to me is how you doing today versus where you were a year from now or a year ago.
mhm, mhm,
And I think that kind of begins the conversation of self-actualization. I
mhm.
think to me, it's about just working on yourself every day, trying to get a little bit better.
Mhm.
Probably more than that, but that's the start. So let me read the definitions because I think the difference between self-actualization and self-transcendence to me is a bit of a nuance.
Yep.
Um, Self-actualization is the realization of one's full potential, creativity, and authentic self, representing the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with an asterisk, obviously, because he added one. It involves becoming the best version of oneself through continuous personal growth, purpose driven living, and self acceptance. Key traits include deep creativity, autonomy, gratitude, and genuine relationships. And then self transcendence is a psychological and spiritual state where individuals move beyond self centered needs to embrace a broader perspective, connecting with others, nature, or a higher purpose. It is characterized by altruism, awe, enhanced well being, often acting as a key to a meaningful life and mature personal development.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, there's yeah, yeah. Self-acceptance. I need to add that one to our library. That's a new one. I don't think I have it in ourselves.
Yeah, when I was looking at the hierarchy in the esteem category, it struck me that there's three of them, like respect, status, and recognition are external.
Mhm.
right? Self-esteem, strength, and freedom are internal, and I just thought that was kind of interesting because I think I strive, not that I'm very good at it, to not be too concerned about the opinions of other people.
Mhm.
Not to the extent that I am not interested in hearing someone else's opinion or don't want to connect with other people. I love doing that. But, particularly if you're walking into a room of strangers and you feel judged, that's, is that on you or is that on them? Right. It's like,
Mhm.
why would I care about what someone else thinks about me? So maybe that's a part of self-transcendence, is getting to a point where you're really in tune with what you have control over, and you're not as concerned about the opinions of other people. That's part of it for me,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think what my takeaway is moving beyond self-centered needs to embrace a broader perspective, connecting with others, higher purpose. I think that's the difference, or that's what I'm learning in this stage in your life. Not everybody wants to go there, um, but I do see the difference, and I see uh, the value of that pathway in life.
Well, I think if you start to think about, and you and I have talked a good bit about how we both feel about life and death and how we feel about religion and faith and how we grew up, and we have differences of opinion in regard to that. But I think that it's an accurate statement to say both of us are pretty self-accountable
Mhm.
and value that, and not terribly interested in the opinions of other people, other than interesting opinions, right? And conversation and dialogue and discussion. That's not what I mean. I mean the judgment of other people, I suppose, would be a better way to say it. And there's
Mhm.
also we've both made space and time at our age to think about, is there more to this? Can I do more? Is there,
Yeah.
and do I, am I just, let's just question it. Let's just talk about it. Let's just ask.
Mhm.
It's kind of almost the purpose of the podcast, is to just drum up conversations about things that maybe men don't talk about enough
Mhm.
or at all. And not like, no one's trying to win the conversation. We're trying to investigate the
Yeah.
idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's called the Imperfect Men's Club. It's a club where you can talk about these things that you normally wouldn't otherwise take the time to do. So, but yeah, let's go down these five list of five items, and I'm interested in
Yeah,
your.
I mean, the first one is the difference between his classical or traditional grouping and this addition of self-transcendence. Is self-actualization the last need in the hierarchy of needs, or is there room for this self-transcendence? And I find the distinction, at least first pass, like I'm not seeing a huge difference. I see a difference, but it seems slight to me. I don't know.
Oh
How do
yeah,
you feel about that, Jim?
I agree. It's very slight, but again, I think it just go deeper. Self, it's becoming fully version of yourself, becoming the fully realized version of yourself.
Yeah, and I
Is
said to I said to you early on when we first started talking about these, I looked at both of them and my immediate thought was, these are not destinations. These are journeys. And because I think by definition, how could you start moving in the direction of either one, self-actualization or self-transcendence, and then
Mhm.
stop?
Yeah.
If you choose to move in that direction, I think you spend the rest of your days continuing to move in that direction, seeking whatever those answers might be,
Mhm.
and that's a bit comforting, I suppose.
Mhm.
Uh,
I think the
but
difference is by nature, humans, we're selfish. We're selfish beings. And, we often, whether we're aware of it or not, are serving ourselves first. That's just part of being human. I think this ties into even with our pregame conversations about politicians and political parties and their agendas. Uh, I've become almost obsessed with narcissism, the behavior of that, because I think
hmm
we all have some uh, level of narcissism in them. But
hmm
when you start to see the same people say the same thing. It makes no sense, or in some cases, say one thing a short 2 years ago and then say something completely opposite. Either they never believed it to begin with, or they're being told to say it. And this is where I think there's a different type of a person that goes beyond that. It's not just about their political needs or their effort to maintain power or to gain more power
Yeah, or control. Yeah.
or control. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's that's a topic we
yeah,
throw some water on that one for now. Let's not throw gas on that one right
yeah.
yet.
But no,
'Cause- well, the second point here was an interesting observation that that it's I guess it's a I didn't know it, so it's lesser known fact that in his diaries during his final years, he kind of arrived at this conclusion that self-actualization was too focused on the ego, and I
yeah,
guess that's where the distinction is, right? The
yes,
self-actualization is an ego-driven thing more so, whereas self-transcendence, seeking out purpose, higher purpose, other people, altruism, awe, those are higher things to grasp for and less about the ego. So that's a good distinction between the
hmm,
last two, actualization and transcendence.
yeah,
And then, you know, self transcendence is what's called here the highest level of human development, doing things for other people and transcending your own ego. I love the topic of service, serving other people. I think that when I reflect back on my life and the mistakes I've made, the accomplishments I've had, the successes that I've had, I always I always pull from the times when I helped other people. It's
hmm,
kind of like I told you the story about getting into recruiting way back in the day when I was 26. I mean, when I helped the first guy find work, he told me I saved his life. I'm like,
hmm,
holy shit, maybe I should consider doing this for a living. And now more recently, with my more purpose-driven work now, helping men in divorce circumstances, that's definitely serving other people, and that's definitely a higher purpose. I think when you help other people, there's no better feeling in the world. And then, if you help a stranger, that's one thing. If you help a friend, that's another. If you help a family member or a child, those are
hmm.
all different levels of
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. This reminds me years ago because when I started my 501c nonprofit, and you know, why do people want this philanthropy in general, right? What is the purpose? Often it is ego. They want people to see that they're doing good for the world, and that's why they do it. That's why they have the parties. That's why they have the fundraisers. They want the world to see how wonderful they are. And then
Hmm.
I recognized that early on after throwing a number of events, and then I heard something about the greatest place to be in life is when you can help somebody and want nothing in return.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I find that when I see a donation and somebody says anonymous, they don't want to, those are the real, uh, those are impressive people that
It's funny
donate
that,
without
yeah,
recognition and
yeah,
do things without being wanting to be recognized or do it. Yeah, I just think it's the highest form of living is to be able to
it
give
is.
something to somebody with really not expecting anything in return,
Yeah.
but just to see them maybe do better than had you. And they don't even need to know. It's not about that. It's your
Yeah,
satisfaction. So
it's
it's a
fun.
very different place.
I was just recently attracted to some writing about Paul Newman, and
Hmm.
he was known for that, but not until he was dead.
Mm.
Everything
Interesting.
that he did,
Yeah.
he apparently would negotiate exorbitant clauses in his contracts after he
Hmm.
became famous and had that leverage,
Hmm.
like the car that he would drive, a chauffeur-driven limousine and a
Yeah.
first-class airplane, and he would not use any of them. He'd show up in a Hertz rental car, and
Yeah.
he would give all of those accoutrements and turn them into cash or make them
Yeah.
available to the local children's hospital. And the hospital never knew where it came from. He never told anybody. And
Yeah.
and the only reason anybody ever found out one day is, well, I guess one of his managers said to him one day, "Where's your limo, man? What's with the little dinky Hertz rental car?" And he's like, don't worry about it. And he
Yeah.
poked around and found out about it. But to your point, he was
Hmm.
known for that and never telling anybody about it. that's saintly stuff, man. That's
Yeah, it
that's
is.
that's really
Yeah,
high powered stuff.
yeah. On the complete opposite of that, I don't know if you're familiar with Cesar Chavez.
Oh yeah.
Story,
Oh
that
yeah.
story came out. So, especially here in California, right? Because that's where he's from. Um, they've made this guy, you know, equal to God as far as what he did for people and for all these years. There's signs everywhere, there's streets everywhere, there's buildings everywhere about how wonderful he is.
Mm.
And then that comes out. Why should we be surprised? Often those people are doing it for their ego. They say they're doing it for others. That's where they get all the accolades. That's where they get all the um, praise. But it's a great example of
Yeah, he was a piece of
oh,
shit.
he really was a piece of
Yeah.
shit. There's no
Yeah.
doubt. Yeah,
So yeah,
and
Paul Newman versus Cesar Chavez. Who knew?
yeah, yeah. Who knew? Yeah, especially on this show that we would stumble across the two. Yeah,
Well, the,
yeah.
the the next one is talks about the how do you achieve transcendence, and it starts off with the theological traditions and wisdom traditions and modern science,
Mhm.
altruism, empathy, and this cultivating a sense of awe is interesting. I always give my dad credit. He's got a what I always referred to as even at 97, he's got this childlike sense of wonder when you
Mhm.
bring something new to him,
Yeah,
right? And
he's
it
always
it can
learning.
it
Yeah.
can be a very small thing like a recipe or a
Mhm.
book recommendation or whatever. But oh my gosh, tell me more about that. And it's genuine. I mean,
Oh
he
yeah,
genuine.
he's
It's really
he's a
something else. And
lifelong learner. I remember my
yeah,
dad being the same way.
yeah,
He
yeah.
often would get
I
excited about learning something new.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope I remain with that quality for the rest of my life. I believe that I will. But yeah, and I think that's an egoless pursuit as well, is to just not feign surprise, but be genuinely impressed and in awe of something that's brought to your attention that you didn't know anything about before,
Yeah.
particularly if it's, one of your grandkids or your kid, you
Yeah.
know. So that's an interesting. And I
Mhm.
also think, to what I said earlier to you, it's one of the reasons that my faith has gotten stronger is that as I get closer to what the end of my life, hopefully not for another, few decades, but you never know. I think about that more, and I think a lot of people find their faith later on in life because they're seeking this transcendence. And if you get introduced to religion properly, fairly, correctly, it can be a wonderful friend.
Mhm.
Faith is a very comforting thing, very very healthy thing, and so I'm also spending time trying to understand more about my faith, and it's fun. It's fun. I never thought about it really in terms of transcendence, but I guess that's part of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, we got two left in 2 minutes, so let's.
Well, I got one on my sheet here, but
Okay, that's fine. Even better. Yeah.
I think that so it ends with the secret to a meaningful life, and I think that the premise here is to conclude by tying these ideas together, noting that research and experience suggest that reaching this state of self-transcendence is the ultimate key to feeling fully alive,
Mhm.
and experiencing life is deeply meaningful. I don't, I agree and I disagree with that at the same time. I think that I don't think you reach the state. I think you strive towards it.
Hmm.
And, people say life is not a destination, life is the journey. I believe that to be true. I think that one of the things that I try to do every day to maintain my level of happiness and optimism and hope is to get better at something,
Mhm.
make they can be really small things. One of the things I kind of talked to you a little bit about this, but I started cooking during COVID, and I get better every day, man. I'm a good cook now, and I was not a good cook 3 or 4 years ago. And that little
Mhm.
thing, and I get a lot of enjoyment for delivering that meal, the presentation as well as the taste and the experience of eating it with my girlfriend and or my children. It's something else, and
Mhm.
I think if you can find something to get better at every day, life gets better.
Yeah, I think says it best. The ultimate key to feeling fully alive and experiencing your life as deeply meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can accomplish that even a few days a week, I think you're doing good.
Yeah, yeah, it's I think at the end of the day, Jim, it comes back to the same thing. We try and think about it in terms of small incremental progress consistently over long periods of time.
Yeah.
I think I'm not seeking out the destination. I think I'm just gonna keep on the journey.
Yeah. I don't think these things come naturally either. I think it's like to your point, it's something you have to make an effort every day to work on.
You do. You have to
Yeah.
work on them. You
Yeah.
definitely have. But anything good, you got to work at, right?
Of course. Yeah.
All
So,
right, dude.
all right.
Thanks.
Till
Thanks for
next
bringing the
week.
topic to the table.
You're welcome.
See you.
Mhm.